The notification pinged on my phone at exactly 3:47 a.m., jolting me from the restless sleep that had become my norm. Another security alert from the company servers. I groaned, sliding my legs out of bed carefully to avoid waking Mara. The hardwood floor felt cold against my bare feet as I padded to my home office. 38 years old, and I was still jumping at every cybersecurity alert like some rookie analyst. But that's what kept our logistics firm's systems secure. My paranoia, my obsession with digital threats lurking in every shadow of our network infrastructure. I glanced back at our bedroom door, where Mara slept peacefully, her auburn hair spread across the pillow like spilled wine. 6 years of marriage, and she still looked like the freelance UX designer who'd captivated me at that tech conference in Chicago. Even in sleep, she maintained that graceful composure that first drew me to her. Down the hall, our daughter Lexi breathed softly in her princess-themed bedroom, clutching her beloved plush owl, Hootie. At 6 years old, she was my entire world, bright, curious, with Mara's green eyes and my stubborn streak. The owl had been her constant companion since she was 3, especially after that terrifying incident at the mall when she'd wandered off. I'd found her that day sitting by the fountain, tears streaming down her tiny face, Hootie pressed tight against her chest. "Daddy, I got lost," she'd whispered, and something in my chest had cracked wide open. That night, driven by a father's protective instinct and my background in child safety systems, I'd carefully embedded a tiny GPS tracker inside Hootie's stuffing. "I'll always know where you are, sweetheart," I'd promised her, showing her the little app on my phone with its friendly blinking dot. She giggled and hugged me tight, and for a moment, I'd felt like the hero fathers are supposed to be. The security alert turned out to be another false alarm, a routine backup process, triggering our overly sensitive monitoring system. I closed my laptop and checked the tracking app out of habit, something I did maybe once a year just to make sure the little device still functioned. The app opened to show Hootie's location history, and I froze. Multiple visits to 4,237 Riverside luxury apartments. Thursday afternoons, the timestamps showed 30 to 40-minute stays, always between 3 o'clock and 4 p.m., always on Thursdays. I stared at the screen, my rational mind scrambling for explanations. Maybe Lexi had daycare field trips? Maybe Mara took her to visit a friend? But as I scrolled through the data, a pattern emerged that made my stomach clench like a fist. 5 consecutive Thursdays. Same location, same duration. And according to Mara's shared calendar, those were the exact times she'd marked as mom-daughter bonding time. I sat in my office chair, the leather creaking in the pre-dawn silence, staring at that damning little dot on the map. My hands trembled as I zoomed in, studying the satellite view of the luxury complex. High-end apartments, the kind that came with concierge services and residents who drove cars worth more than most people's annual salaries. The kind of place where a senior IT director might live. Reed Park's face flashed in my mind, my colleague, my supposed friend, the man I'd trusted with sensitive database access just last month. Tall, charming, with silver hair and the kind of confidence that made him popular at company mixers. He'd always been friendly with Mara at corporate events, complimenting her design work, making her laugh at his stories. But surely not. Surely my wife of 6 years, the mother of my child, wouldn't... I forced myself to breathe, to think logically. There had to be an innocent explanation. Mara was devoted to our family. She worked from home, took care of Lexi, supported my demanding career without complaint. She wasn't the type to... My phone buzzed with a text message. "Mara, can't sleep either? Miss you. Come back to bed." I stared at the heart emoji, that little digital symbol that once would have made me smile. Now it felt like a lie, like everything else in my carefully constructed life. I typed back, "Just checking some work stuff. Be there soon." But I didn't go back to bed. I sat in that chair until dawn crept through the windows, studying the GPS data, memorizing every timestamp, every location, every damning piece of evidence that suggested my world was built on deception. When Mara appeared in the doorway at 6:30 a.m., already dressed in her yoga clothes, she looked like an angel. "You've been up all night again," she said, concern creasing her brow. "Sem, you're going to exhaust yourself." "Just some security protocols," I replied, closing the laptop quickly. "How did you sleep?" "Good. Lexi's asking for pancakes again." She moved behind my chair, her hands settling on my shoulders, beginning one of those massages that usually melted away my stress. "You're so tense. Maybe you should take a day off." Her touch, once my sanctuary, now felt like manipulation. I forced myself not to flinch away. "Maybe? Hey, what's on your schedule today?" Oh, the usual. Might take Lexi to the park after lunch. She's been cooped up all week with this rain. Mara's voice was casual, practiced. Why? Just wondering. I might leave work early, spend some time with you both. Something flickered across her face. Was it panic? Disappointment? And that would be lovely. But didn't you say you had that security audit today? I had said that. Yesterday in passing. But it was Tuesday, not Thursday. Thursday was still 2 days away. Right, I said. I forgot. She kissed the top of my head. My absent-minded genius. Come on, let's get breakfast started before Princess Lexi becomes Princess Grumpy. As she left the room, I reopened the laptop and created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Project Recovery, because if my worst fears were true, I was going to need all my technical expertise to recover not just my daughter's toy, but my entire life. Thursday arrived like a sentencing. I sat in my car across from Lexi's daycare at 2:45 p.m., laptop balanced on my knees, the tracking app refreshing every 30 seconds. My hands felt clammy against the steering wheel as I watched other parents pick up their children, normal families living normal lives, unaware that one of their own was potentially falling apart in the parking lot. At 2:52 p.m., Mara's silver Honda pulled up to the daycare entrance. I slumped lower in my seat, watching through the windshield as she emerged. Looking radiant in a sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary, she moved with purpose, checking her phone twice before disappearing into the building. 5 minutes later, she reappeared with Lexi, who clutched Hootie tight against her chest. They walked to the car, Mara's hand gentle on our daughter's back as she helped her into the car seat. From this distance, they looked like the perfect mother and child, and for a moment I wondered if I was losing my mind. Maybe I'd misread the GPS data. Maybe there was an innocent explanation for everything. Then Mara's car turned left instead of right, away from our house, away from the park she'd mentioned, toward the wealthy district across town. I followed at a distance, my heart hammering against my ribs. The tracking app confirmed what my eyes already knew. Hootie was moving toward 4,237 Riverside luxury apartments. The complex was even more impressive in person. Glass and steel towers rising against the gray sky, with manicured gardens and a circular drive lined with luxury vehicles. I parked across the street and watched Mara's Honda disappear into the underground garage. My phone buzzed. The tracking app showed Hootie's location. Building C, approximate floor 15, 17. I pulled up the company directory on my laptop. Reed Park's emergency contact information was still in my access folder from when I'd helped set up the new security protocols last month. His address, 4,237 Riverside Luxury Apartments, Building C, Unit 1547. 15th floor. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, fighting the urge to storm into that building and confront them both. But I was a systems engineer, trained to gather data before drawing conclusions. I needed proof, not assumptions. I needed to know exactly what was happening in Reed Park's apartment while my daughter played with her toy. 43 minutes later, Mara's car emerged from the garage. I followed them back toward town, maintaining careful distance, my mind racing through possibilities. When they stopped at the ice cream shop near our house, I drove past and headed home. By the time they returned an hour later, I was at my desk, working on what appeared to be routine server maintenance. In reality, I was upgrading Hootie's tracking device with additional capabilities I'd been developing for a child safety project before I'd left the public sector. Daddy! Lexi burst into my office, ice cream still smeared around her mouth. We went to get strawberry cones. Did you have fun with Mommy? I asked, lifting her onto my lap. Uh-huh. We visited her friend and I played with Hootie in a big room with lots of windows. There were airplanes outside. My blood turned cold. Reed's apartment was on the 15th floor, with views of the airport approach pattern. That sounds exciting, sweetheart. Did Mommy's friend have a nice apartment? It was really big, and he had a pool table, but Mommy said I couldn't play with it. Lexi's eyes were wide with the wonder only 6-year-olds could feel about adult spaces. He made juice for Mommy, but it was grown-up juice that smelled funny. Alcohol. In the middle of the afternoon, while my daughter was present. Did you like Mommy's friend? I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral. Lexi scrunched up her nose. He was okay. He had silver hair like Grandpa, but he was different. He kept looking at Mommy in a weird way, and he asked me to play in the other room a lot. I set her down gently. Why don't you go wash your hands for dinner? Okay, Daddy. Can Hootie come to dinner too? Of course, sweetheart. After she left, I opened my laptop and accessed the company's internal systems. Reed Park had requested extended database access 3 weeks ago, citing a security audit. I'd approved it myself, trusting a colleague's word without question. Now, I ran a detailed log analysis, tracking every query Reed had made against our servers. What I found made my stomach drop into my shoes. Customer shipping manifests, financial records, route optimization data, contract details with our biggest clients, everything necessary to undercut our company's competitive advantages, everything that would be worth millions to our competitors. I pulled up Reed's employment history, cross-referencing it with the timeline of his database access. His queries intensified on the same days Hootie's GPS showed visits to his apartment. The same days Mara had marked mom-daughter time on her calendar. The pattern was clear, methodical, devastating. My wife wasn't just having an affair. She was providing cover for corporate espionage, using our daughter as an unwitting accomplice, while she passed along access credentials or sensitive information to a man who was systematically stealing from the company I'd spent years protecting. I leaned back in my chair, my hands shaking with a rage so pure it felt like electricity in my veins. All those late nights I'd spent fortifying our digital defenses, and the real threat had been sleeping in my bed, eating at my table, kissing me goodnight while she planned my destruction. But I wasn't the same man who'd discovered his daughter's toy in the wrong place 5 days ago. That man had been trusting, naive, willing to assume the best about people he loved. This man, the one sitting in this chair, staring at evidence of betrayal so complete it took his breath away. This man was going to make them both pay for every lie, every manipulation, every moment they'd used my child as a shield for their crimes. I opened a new secure folder on my laptop and began downloading Reed's complete database access logs. If they wanted to play games with corporate espionage, they were about to learn what a real cybersecurity expert could do when he stopped being the good guy. The basement of our house had a workbench where I'd been tinkering with upgraded tracking devices for the child safety contract I'd abandoned when I took the corporate job. Tonight, I was going back to work. Hootie was about to become the most sophisticated surveillance device ever disguised as a child's toy. The new tracking device I installed in Hootie was a masterpiece of miniaturization, GPS tracking, audio recording capability, and real-time data transmission, all hidden within electronics no bigger than 2 stacked quarters. As I carefully stitched the owl's seam closed, my hands were steady, despite the fury burning in my chest. Lexi never suspected anything when I returned her beloved companion the next morning. "Hootie feels different," she said, hugging the owl tight. "I cleaned him up for you," I replied, forcing a smile. He was getting a little dusty. "Thank you, Daddy. Hootie says he loves you too." If only she knew that Hootie was about to become my spy in the heart of enemy territory. Thursday came again, and I was ready. At 2:30 p.m., I was positioned in the parking lot of a coffee shop with clear sight lines to Reed's apartment building. My laptop displayed multiple windows, the GPS tracker showing Hootie's location, an audio recording interface, and a database monitoring system tracking any access to our company servers. At 3:14 p.m., Mara's Honda disappeared into the underground garage. At 3:16 p.m., Hootie's signal confirmed arrival at the 15th floor. At 3:18 p.m., I activated the audio recording function. What I heard in the next 40 minutes would have destroyed a weaker man. "Can't keep doing this forever," Mara's voice came through crystal clear. "Sem's getting suspicious about something. Yesterday he asked too many questions about my schedule." "Relax, gorgeous." Reed's voice was smooth, confident. "Your husband's a tech nerd, not a detective. As long as you keep playing the devoted wife, he'll never figure it out." "But what if nothing? We've been planning this for months. 6 more weeks, and I'll have everything we need to start our own company. Your dear husband's security protocols are about to make us very wealthy." I gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought it might crack. "I just hate lying to Lexi," Mara said. "She asks questions about why we come here. Kids forget everything. Besides, once we're set up in California, you can tell her whatever story you want about why Daddy isn't coming with us." California. They were planning to take my daughter across the country. She adores him, Reed. This is going to devastate her. She'll get over it. Kids are resilient. And I'll be a good stepfather. Better than her biological father who works 18 hours a day and ignores his family. "He doesn't ignore us," Mara said. And for a moment, I heard something like guilt in her voice. "Really? When's the last time he took you on a real vacation? When's the last time he surprised you with something romantic? When's the last time he made you feel like a woman instead of just a mother and housekeeper?" Silence. "That's what I thought," Reed continued. Sem's a good provider, I'll give him that, but he's boring, predictable. You deserve better than a man who gets excited about server configurations. Stop it, Mara said, but her voice was weak. I know you're right, but he's still what? The father of your child? That's all he is now, Mara. A sperm donor and a paycheck. You said it yourself. You haven't felt anything real for him in years. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to vomit. The access codes you got me last week were perfect, Reed continued. I was able to download the entire customer database without triggering any security alerts. Your husband's own credentials used against him. It's poetic justice. How much more do you need? Just the route optimization algorithms and the supplier contracts. Once I have those, we'll have everything necessary to destroy his company from the inside. Our new firm will be positioned to steal every major client they have. And you're sure this won't trace back to us? Reed laughed. Baby, your husband taught me everything I know about covering digital tracks. He's about to be destroyed by his own expertise. There was a pause, then the sound of movement. When Mara spoke again, her voice was breathless. Where's Lexi? Playing in the guest room with her owl. Don't worry, she can't hear anything from there. What followed were sounds that confirmed my worst fears about their relationship. For 23 minutes, I listened to my wife betray me in ways that went far beyond corporate espionage. When their intimate encounter ended, their conversation resumed. I sometimes feel guilty, Mara said. Sem's not a bad man. He loves Lexi so much. Guilty enough to stop? Reed's voice was amused. No, I can't go back to that life. But I wish there was a way to do this without destroying him completely. There isn't. You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. Besides, he'll survive. Men like your husband always land on their feet. They find some other woman to take care of them and bore to death. What about custody? He'll fight for Lexi. Let him try. By the time our lawyers are finished, he'll be facing criminal charges for corporate theft. Hard to get custody when you're in federal prison. Criminal charges? The beauty of using his own credentials is that all the evidence points directly to him. I've been very careful to make sure the data trail leads straight to Sem's access logs. When the theft is discovered, he'll be the prime suspect. But that's justice? Absolutely. He's been hoarding those algorithms and client lists for years, keeping all the profits for himself instead of sharing them with the people who actually do the work. I'm just redistributing the wealth more fairly. I turned off the audio recording and sat in my car, shaking with a rage so complete it felt like religious experience. They weren't just destroying my marriage. They were planning to frame me for their crimes, steal my daughter, and leave me to face federal charges for corporate espionage. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd forgotten that I was the one who designed our security systems. Every algorithm, every protocol, every digital footprint they thought would protect them. I'd created all of it, and what I'd created I could manipulate. I opened my laptop and began typing. If Reed Park wanted to play games with digital evidence, he was about to learn what happened when you challenged a man who'd spent 15 years protecting systems from people exactly like him. By the time I was finished, they wouldn't just lose everything they'd stolen. They'd lose everything they'd ever had. That night, while Mara slept peacefully beside me, I worked in my basement until dawn. The recording from Hootie played through headphones as I constructed the most elaborate digital trap of my career. Reed Park thought he was clever, using my credentials to access sensitive data. What he didn't realize was that every security system I'd ever built included hidden monitoring protocols, backdoors known only to me, designed to catch exactly this kind of inside threat. I'd been watching his every move for weeks without realizing it. Now it was time to turn the tables. First, I created a series of honeypot databases, fake repositories filled with tempting but worthless information. To Reed's untrained eye, they would appear to contain our most valuable trade secrets. In reality, they were digital landmines, rigged to explode the moment he tried to download their contents. Second, I modified the access logs he thought he was manipulating. Instead of pointing to my credentials, the evidence trail would lead directly back to his personal devices, his home network, his own digital fingerprints. Third, and most importantly, I prepared the nuclear option. Hidden in Reed's future downloads would be a sophisticated tracking virus, one that would not only monitor his activities, but also create an unbreakable chain of evidence, linking him to a massive corporate espionage operation spanning multiple companies. The virus would lie dormant until activated, then burst into life like a digital cancer, documenting every crime he'd committed and preparing to transmit that evidence directly to federal cybercrime investigators. But I wasn't finished. If Reed and Mara wanted to destroy my life, I was going to make sure they understood the true cost of that decision. I accessed Mara's laptop while she slept, implanting tracking software that would monitor every keystroke, every email, every digital conversation. I needed to understand the full scope of their conspiracy, map every ally, identify every weakness. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Mara hadn't just provided access codes. She'd been photographing documents from my home office, copying files from my personal laptop, even recording conversations during family dinners when I discussed work challenges. Every intimate moment of our marriage had been weaponized against me. But the most damaging evidence was in her email drafts folder. Detailed plans for their new life in California, complete with bank accounts, rental properties, and custody arrangements that assumed I'd be serving federal prison time. They'd been planning this for 8 months. 8 months of lies, manipulation, and calculated betrayal. I copied everything onto encrypted drives, building a comprehensive case file that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. But I wasn't ready to involve law enforcement yet. This was personal now, and I wanted front row seats when their world imploded. Friday morning, I called in sick to work, the first sick day I'd taken in 3 years. Mara seemed surprised but pleased. "You've been working too hard," she said, bringing me coffee in bed. "Maybe we should do something fun as a family this weekend." "I'd like that," I replied, studying her face. How had I never noticed how easily she lied? "Maybe we could go to the zoo. Lexi loves the owl exhibit." "That sounds perfect. I'll pack a picnic lunch." She kissed my forehead, the same lips that had been on Reed Park's body yesterday afternoon, and I forced myself not to recoil. "Mara," I said as she reached the bedroom door, "do you ever regret anything about our marriage?" She turned, her face a mask of concerned innocence. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if you're happy." "Really happy?" For just a moment I saw something crack in her expression. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. Then the mask slipped back into place. "I'm perfectly happy, Sem. We have a beautiful daughter, a lovely home, a good life." "Why would you ask something like that?" "Just wondering. I love you, you know." "I love you too." Another lie, delivered with the practiced ease of a professional con artist. After she left for what she claimed was a grocery run, I accessed our joint bank accounts. Over the past 6 months, Mara had been making small but consistent transfers to an account I didn't recognize. The amounts were carefully calculated to stay below the automatic reporting thresholds. 500 here, 800 there, never enough to trigger alerts. In total, she'd stolen nearly $24,000 from our family savings. Money that was probably funding the California apartment she'd already secured for her new life with Reed. I sat in my home office, surrounded by the evidence of their conspiracy, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. The man who'd discovered his daughter's toy in the wrong place a week ago was dead. The man who'd trusted his wife's explanations and assumed the best about people was gone forever. In his place sat someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who understood that mercy was a luxury he could no longer afford. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to the Federal Cybercrime Task Force, but didn't send it. Not yet. I wanted Reed to make his final move, to download the poisoned data that would seal his fate. According to Mara's calendar, they had another mom-daughter bonding session scheduled for next Thursday. That would be the day I'd destroyed them both. But first, I was going to enjoy watching them think they'd won. Thursday arrived gray and cold, with the kind of autumn rain that made everything look bleak and unforgiving. Perfect weather for what I had planned. I'd spent the week playing the role of the oblivious husband to perfection, asking about Mara's day, helping Lexi with homework, even suggesting we plan a family vacation for Christmas. Mara seemed relieved by my apparent normalcy, unaware that every smile, every kiss, every moment of manufactured domesticity was being recorded and documented. At 2:45 p.m., I was in position across from Reed's apartment building, my laptop displaying real-time feeds from 3 different monitoring systems. This time, I wasn't just watching. I was controlling the entire operation. Mara's Honda disappeared into the underground garage at 3:11 p.m. By 3:15 p.m., Hootie's signal confirmed they were in Reed's apartment. At 3:17 p.m., I triggered the trap. The honeypot database I'd created appeared to malfunction, displaying what looked like a critical system error that would require immediate manual intervention. The fake emergency would give Reed the perfect excuse to access our most sensitive files. Files that were actually booby-trapped with enough evidence to destroy him 10 times over. I activated Hootie's audio recording and listened as my plan unfolded. "What's wrong?" Mara's voice was tense. Some kind of system glitch at your husband's company, Reed replied. Perfect timing, actually. System errors like this usually create opportunities to access data that's normally locked down. Is it safe? Baby, I've been doing this for months without getting caught. Your husband's too trusting to suspect his own IT director. The sound of typing filled the recording as Reed accessed his workstation. I watched on my own screen as he took the bait, navigating directly to the files I'd prepared for him. Jackpot, he said. I'm looking at their entire route optimization algorithm. This is worth millions. How long will it take to download? About 10 minutes. Why don't you keep me company while we wait? What followed was audio I'd heard before, but this time I listened with cold analytical detachment instead of heartbreak. Every sound, every word was being recorded in multiple formats, backed up to secure servers, and time-stamped with precision that would satisfy any court in the country. But the real show was just beginning. At 3:31 p.m., Reed's download completed. The moment his system processed the final file, my virus activated. I watched on my monitoring software as the digital parasite spread through Reed's network like wildfire, copying every file, every email, every piece of evidence of his criminal activities. Within 90 seconds, it had found and documented 3 separate corporate espionage operations dating back 14 months. Reed Park hadn't just been stealing from my company. He'd been running a systematic data theft operation targeting multiple firms in our industry. Something's wrong. Reed's voice was sharp with sudden panic. My system's running some kind of scan I didn't initiate. What does that mean? I don't know. It's accessing files I've never seen before, creating some kind of report. I smiled as I watched the virus complete its work. In addition to documenting Reed's crimes, it was also creating an unbreakable evidence trail linking every piece of stolen data directly back to his personal devices. Can you stop it? I'm trying, but Reed's voice cut off abruptly. Reed, what's happening? The system just locked me out, and there's a message on the screen. What does it say? Reed's voice was barely a whisper. It says, "Game over. Evidence transmitted to Federal Cybercrime Task Force. Have a nice day." The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Transmitted to who? Mara's voice cracked with terror. Federal investigators. Someone's been watching us, Mara. Someone knows everything. I disconnected the audio feed and opened my secure email, where an automated message confirmed that a complete evidence package had been transmitted to the FBI Cybercrime Division, the Department of Justice, and the Security Division of my own company. 23 gigabytes of evidence, audio recordings, financial records, stolen files, and a complete timeline of their conspiracy. But I wasn't finished. I activated the second phase of my plan, a comprehensive financial audit that would freeze every account Reed and Mara had access to, pending investigation of money laundering charges. The California apartment, the stolen savings, the payments Reed had received from competing companies, all of it would be locked down within hours. Phase 3 was even more satisfying. I'd spent days crafting a legal brief that outlined not just their crimes, but also the endangerment of a minor. Using Lexi as cover for corporate espionage constituted child endangerment under federal law, with mandatory minimum sentences that would ensure they both spent years in prison. My phone rang. Mara's number. Sem? Her voice was panicked, desperate. Something's wrong. We need to come home right away. What's wrong, honey? I asked, my voice perfectly calm. I can't explain over the phone, just we need to talk. Of course. I'll be waiting. I hung up and sent one final email, this one to the best family law attorney in the state, along with a complete package of evidence documenting Mara's betrayal and the danger she'd placed our daughter in. By the time she walked through our front door, every aspect of her life would be under federal investigation. 28 minutes later, Mara's Honda pulled into our driveway. I watched from the living room window as she sat in the car for several minutes, clearly trying to compose herself. When she finally emerged, Lexi clutching Hootie beside her, she looked like a woman walking to her own execution. Daddy! Lexi ran to me and I scooped her up, holding her tight. How was your afternoon with Mommy? Good. We went to see her friend again, but he seemed upset about something. His computer was making weird noises. Computer problems can be frustrating, I agreed, looking directly at Mara. Sometimes systems crash when people try to access files they shouldn't. Mara's face went white. Why don't you go play with Hootie in your room, sweetheart? I said to Lexi. Mommy and I need to talk about grown-up things. After Lexi disappeared upstairs, Mara and I stood in our living room. The same room where we'd exchanged wedding vows 6 years ago, where we'd celebrated Lexi's first steps, where we'd built what I'd thought was a life together. Sam, she began, her voice shaking. I need to tell you something. I know exactly what you need to tell me, I replied. The question is, are you going to lie to me one more time, or are you finally going to tell the truth? She collapsed onto the couch, her face in her hands. How long have you known? Long enough to document everything. Long enough to build a case that's going to put both you and Reed in federal prison for the next 10 to 15 years. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. Sam, please, I can explain. Explain what? How you've been using our daughter as cover while you helped your lover steal corporate secrets. How you've been draining our bank accounts to fund your escape to California. How you plan to frame me for your crimes. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I sat across from her, my voice calm and cold. I understand that you're a criminal who was willing to destroy your family for money. I understand that you endangered our daughter by bringing her to your partner in crime's apartment. And I understand that in about an hour, FBI agents are going to arrest both you and Reed for federal espionage charges. Mara's face crumpled. What about Lexi? What about her? Did you think about her when you were planning to disappear to California? Did you think about her when you were using her favorite toy as cover for corporate theft? I never meant for any of this to hurt her, but it did hurt her. Every lie you told, every time you put her in danger, every moment you chose Reed Park over your own family, you were hurting her. The sound of car doors slamming interrupted our conversation. Through the window, I could see federal agents approaching our front door. Sam, please, Mara whispered. She's your daughter, too. Don't let them take me away from her. I looked at this woman who'd shared my bed, raised my child, and systematically destroyed everything we'd built together. Once, I'd loved her more than life itself. Now, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction as I heard the FBI agents climbing our front steps. You took yourself away from her the moment you chose to become a criminal, I said. I'm just making sure she's safe from the consequences of your choices. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it, leaving Mara sobbing on the couch. The same couch where we used to watch movies together, where she used to fall asleep in my arms after long days with the baby. Those people were gone now. In their place stood a federal criminal and the man who'd brought her to justice. When I opened the door to let the agents inside, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. The war was over. I'd won. The arrest was everything I'd imagined and more. Special Agent Catherine Walsh, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, presented her warrant with the kind of crisp professionalism that spoke to years of complex financial crimes. Behind her stood 3 other agents, including a cybercrime specialist who recognized my name from my previous work in public sector security. Mrs. Hollister, Agent Walsh said, her voice carrying the authority of the federal government. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, money laundering, and child endangerment in the commission of federal crimes. Mara's legs gave out. She collapsed back onto the couch, her face a mask of disbelief. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent, Agent Walsh continued, unmoved by Mara's breakdown. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As they read her rights, I went upstairs to Lexi's room. She was playing with Hootie, completely unaware that her world was about to change forever. Sweetheart, I said, sitting on her bed, some police officers are here to talk to Mommy about grown-up problems. You're going to stay with me tonight, okay? Is Mommy in trouble? Yes, she is. But it's not your fault, and it's not something you did wrong. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and they have to face consequences. Will she come back? The question hit me like a physical blow. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her mother is going to federal prison? I don't know, sweetheart, but no matter what happens, I'll always be here to take care of you. She hugged Hootie tighter. Will you tell Hootie that everything's going to be okay? Everything's going to be okay, I whispered to the owl that had started this entire nightmare. Daddy's going to make sure of it. Downstairs, they were placing handcuffs on Mara. She looked up at me with desperate eyes. Sam, please don't let them take me. Think about Lexi. Think about our family. I am thinking about our family, I replied. I'm thinking about the family you destroyed when you chose to become a criminal. Agent Walsh approached me as they led Mara toward the door. Mr. Hollister, we'll need you to come in for a debriefing tomorrow. The evidence you provided is some of the most comprehensive documentation of corporate espionage we've seen in years. I'll be there. We've also arrested Reed Park at his apartment. He's claiming innocence, but the digital evidence is overwhelming. What happens now? Federal prosecution for both of them. Based on the evidence, we're looking at conspiracy charges, computer fraud, theft of trade secrets, and money laundering. With your wife's participation in endangering a minor during the commission of federal crimes, they're facing 15 to 20 years each. After they left, I sat in my living room with Lexi, trying to explain why her mother wouldn't be coming home. She cried, and I held her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The house felt different now, cleaner somehow, as if a poison had been extracted from its walls. That night, after Lexi fell asleep clutching Hootie, I sat in my office and began planning our new life. The federal investigation would take months, but the outcome was inevitable. The evidence was overwhelming, the crimes clear, the penalties severe. Mara and Reed had gambled everything on a scheme to destroy me and steal my company's secrets. Instead, they'd handed me the tools to destroy them completely. But as I sat there in the silence, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel the savage satisfaction I'd anticipated. Instead, I felt tired, sad, and strangely empty. The man I'd been before discovering Hootie's tracking data was gone forever. In his place sat someone harder, more ruthless, capable of orchestrating the systematic destruction of 2 human lives without losing a moment's sleep. I'd won the war, but victory had come at a cost I was only beginning to understand. Outside, it was still raining. 6 months later, I sat in federal court watching my wife's life end in real time. The prosecution had built their case meticulously, using every piece of evidence I'd provided to construct an airtight narrative of betrayal, greed, and criminal conspiracy. Mara sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her once beautiful hair now lank and unwashed, her face gaunt from months in federal detention. She'd lost weight, lost her color, lost everything that had once made her radiant. Reed Park sat beside her, his silver hair now completely gray, his expensive clothes replaced by prison garb. The man who'd once carried himself with such confidence now looked broken, defeated, aged 10 years and 6 months. They'd both pled not guilty, despite evidence so overwhelming that their own attorneys had privately advised them to accept plea bargains. But Reed's arrogance and Mara's desperation had led them to roll the dice on a jury trial. It was the worst decision they could have made. Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Santos was a prosecutor with a reputation for complex financial crimes. She'd spent weeks preparing for this case, and her opening statement was surgical in its precision. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this case is about betrayal on multiple levels. The betrayal of a marriage, the betrayal of a company's trust, and most importantly, the betrayal of a 6-year-old child who was used as an unwitting accomplice in her mother's crimes." She gestured to a large screen where Hootie's tracking data was, displayed in stark detail. For months, these defendants used this little girl's beloved toy as cover for a systematic campaign of corporate espionage. While the child played innocently, believing she was spending quality time with her mother, she was actually being used as a human shield for criminal activity. The jury, 8 women and 4 men, most of them parents, looked horrified. The evidence will show that Mara Hollister and Reed Park conspired to steal trade secrets worth millions of dollars. They drained bank accounts, manipulated computer systems, and planned to frame an innocent man for their crimes. But most damaging of all, they were willing to use a child to accomplish their goals. Santos moved to the evidence table, where dozens of exhibits were arranged with courtroom precision. You will hear recordings of the defendants discussing their crimes. You will see financial records documenting their theft. You will review computer logs, proving their systematic violation of federal cybercrime statutes. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the courtroom. But most importantly, you will hear the voice of a little girl describing her visits to Reed Park's apartment, unaware that her presence was providing cover for federal crimes. The recording of Lexi describing the big room with lots of windows played through the courtroom speakers. Several jurors visibly winced. When it was the defense's turn, Mara's attorney, James Morrison, attempted to paint her as a victim of manipulation. "My client is guilty of adultery," he conceded. "She's guilty of making terrible choices that destroyed her marriage, but she is not guilty of espionage. Mara Hollister is a stay-at-home mother with no technical background. No understanding of computer systems, no ability to mastermind the complex crimes described by the prosecution. It was a reasonable strategy, but it fell apart the moment Santos played the recordings from Hootie. Mara's own voice filled the courtroom. I just hate lying to Lexi. She asks questions about why we come here. And Reed's response, kids forget everything. Besides, once we're set up in California, you can tell her whatever story you want about why Daddy isn't coming with us. The sound of my wife planning to kidnap my daughter was devastating testimony. Reed's attorney tried a different approach, claiming his client was being framed by a vengeful husband with sophisticated technical skills. Sem Hollister is a cybersecurity expert, defense attorney David Chen argued. He has the knowledge and the access to manipulate digital evidence, to create false data trails, to manufacture evidence of crimes that never occurred. It was a clever theory that might have worked against a less prepared prosecution. Santos destroyed it in 30 minutes. She called me to the witness stand on the third day of testimony. Walking past Mara's table, I caught her eye for the first time since her arrest. She mouthed the word please, but I looked away. Under Santos's questioning, I walked the jury through the discovery of the tracking data, the installation of the upgraded surveillance equipment, and the systematic documentation of their crimes. Mr. Hollister, Santos asked, did you manipulate any of the evidence presented in this case? No, I did not. Did you create false data trails or manufacture digital evidence? No. Every piece of evidence presented here is authentic and unaltered. Could you have manipulated this evidence if you'd wanted to? I paused, considering the question carefully. Yes, I have the technical skills to manipulate digital evidence, but that would have been unnecessary. The defendants documented their own crimes so thoroughly that manipulation would have been redundant. Morrison cross-examined me aggressively, trying to paint me as a controlling husband who'd driven his wife to seek affection elsewhere. Mr. Hollister, isn't it true that you were emotionally distant from your wife? I worked long hours to provide for my family. If that made me distant, then yes. Isn't it true that you neglected your wife's emotional needs? I loved my wife. I trusted her. I believed she loved me in return. If that constitutes neglect, then I'm guilty as charged. Isn't it true that you installed surveillance equipment in your daughter's toy without your wife's knowledge or consent? I installed a GPS tracker 3 years ago. After my daughter got lost in a mall, I updated that equipment when I discovered it was recording evidence of federal crimes. So you admit to conducting surveillance on your own family? I admit to protecting my daughter from being used as an accessory to federal crimes. Morrison pressed harder. Hey, Mr. Hollister, isn't this entire prosecution simply an elaborate revenge scheme by a man who couldn't accept that his wife had fallen out of love with him? I looked directly at the jury. If I wanted revenge, I would have handled this privately. Instead, I gathered evidence and turned it over to federal authorities because my wife and her accomplice were committing serious crimes that threatened national economic security. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The defense presented character witnesses, questioned the admissibility of evidence, and attempted to create reasonable doubt about their client's intentions. None of it mattered. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. On the charge of conspiracy to commit computer fraud and offense, how do you find guilty? On the charge of theft of trade secrets, how do you find guilty? On the charge of money laundering, how do you find guilty? On the charge of child endangerment in the commission of federal crimes, how do you find guilty? Mara collapsed when the final verdict was read. Reed stared straight ahead, his face a mask of disbelief. Judge Patricia Hamilton set sentencing for 6 weeks later. As the courtroom emptied, Mara's eyes found mine one last time. This time, she didn't mouth any words. She just looked at me with an expression of such complete defeat that for just a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But the moment passed. Justice had been served. The federal courthouse was packed on sentencing day. Media coverage had been extensive. The case had everything journalists loved: corporate espionage, marital betrayal, and the twist of a child's toy bringing down a criminal conspiracy. I sat in the gallery with Lexi, who was now 7 and had been in therapy for months to help her understand why Mommy was in jail. She'd brought Hootie with her, still unaware of the owl's role in exposing her mother's crimes. Judge Hamilton entered the courtroom with the gravity befitting a federal sentencing hearing. She'd reviewed hundreds of pages of pre-sentence reports, character letters, and victim impact statements. The court calls the matter of United States versus Mara Elizabeth Hollister and Reed William Park, she announced. Mara stood first, flanked by her attorneys. 6 months in federal detention had aged her dramatically. The vibrant woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone hollow-eyed and broken. Mrs. Hollister, Judge Hamilton began, you have been convicted of serious federal crimes that strike at the heart of our economic security. The evidence shows a systematic campaign of theft, deception, and manipulation that spanned nearly a year. She paused, consulting her notes. What makes your crimes particularly egregious is your willingness to use your own daughter as cover for criminal activity. The court has reviewed extensive psychological testimony about the potential long-term damage to this child, who was unknowingly made an accomplice to her mother's crimes. Mara began crying softly. You violated the trust of your husband, your family, and the federal systems designed to protect American businesses from exactly this kind of corporate espionage. But, most damaging of all, you violated the innocence of your own child. Judge Hamilton leaned forward. Mrs. Hollister, do you wish to address the court before I impose sentence? Mara stood shakily. Your Honor, I want to say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry to my husband, to my daughter, to everyone I've hurt. I made terrible choices, and I know I have to face the consequences. But please, I'm begging you, don't separate me from my daughter for her entire childhood. She needs her mother. It was a pathetic plea from a woman who'd already lost everything. Mrs. Hollister, Judge Hamilton replied, your daughter needed her mother to protect her, not to use her as a shield for federal crimes. The time to consider your daughter's welfare was before you chose to become a criminal. She consulted the sentencing guidelines. Taking into account the severity of your crimes, the amount of financial damage caused, and the particularly aggravating factor of child endangerment, the court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $2.3 million. Mara collapsed into her chair as if she'd been shot. Reed Park's sentencing was even harsher. Mr. Park, Judge Hamilton said, as the mastermind of this conspiracy, you bear primary responsibility for these crimes. You manipulated a vulnerable woman, endangered a child, and attempted to steal trade secrets that could have compromised American economic interests. Reed stood stoically, his silver hair now completely white. The court sentences you to 22 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $4.1 million and are permanently barred from working in any position that involves access to computer systems or confidential information. 22 years. Reed Park would be 62 when he was released, if he lived that long. As the bailiffs led them away in shackles, Mara turned back one last time. Her eyes found Lexi, who was coloring quietly in her seat, oblivious to the fact that she'd just watched her mother disappear for the next 15 years. I love you, baby, Mara called out, her voice breaking. Lexi looked up and waved. Bye, Mommy. See you later. The innocence in those words was heartbreaking. After the sentencing, I was approached by Agent Walsh, who'd become something of a friend during the months of investigation and trial preparation. How do you feel? She asked. Empty, I admitted. I thought I'd feel more satisfied. Justice isn't about satisfaction, she replied. It's about consequences. They committed serious crimes, and now they're facing serious consequences. Your daughter is safe, your company's secrets are protected, and 2 criminals are going to prison for a very long time. I know, it's just that you loved her once, I nodded. The hardest cases are always the ones where love gets twisted into something destructive, Agent Walsh said. But you did the right thing. Never doubt that. Outside the courthouse, a reporter approached me. Mr. Hollister, how do you feel about your wife's sentence? I feel that justice was served, I replied. My primary concern now is protecting my daughter and helping her heal from the trauma her mother caused. Do you have any regrets about how you handled the investigation? I thought about that question carefully. I regret that it was necessary, I finally said. I regret that the woman I married chose to become a criminal, but I don't regret protecting my daughter or exposing their crimes. What's next for you and your daughter? We're going to build a new life, a better life, one based on truth instead of lies. That night, after Lexi was asleep, I sat in my office and opened the drawer where I'd kept all the evidence files. Hundreds of documents, thousands of emails, audio recordings, financial records. The complete documentation of how a marriage dies and a family gets destroyed. I'd kept it all, partly for legal reasons and partly because I couldn't quite believe it had really happened. Now it was over. The trials were finished, the sentences imposed, justice served. I took the files outside and burned them in a metal drum in our backyard, watching months of pain and betrayal turn to ash in the autumn night. When the last paper had burned, I went back inside and found Lexi standing at the top of the stairs, clutching Hootie. "Daddy, I had a bad dream." "Come here, sweetheart." She ran down the stairs and into my arms. I carried her back to her room, tucked her into bed, and sat beside her until she fell back asleep. Looking at her peaceful face in the moonlight, I made a promise. She would never know the full extent of what her mother had done. She would never know about the recordings, the surveillance, the systematic betrayal that had destroyed our family. She would know that her mother made mistakes and had to go away for a while. She would know that sometimes adults make bad choices. She would know that I would always be there to protect her. But she would never know that her beloved Hootie had been the instrument of her mother's destruction. Some secrets were worth keeping. Epilogue. 3 years later. The conference room at Morrison, Lynch and Associates, was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Minneapolis, polished mahogany table that could seat 20, and walls lined with legal tomes that represented decades of courtroom victories. Today, it was the setting for Mara's final defeat. "Mr. Hollister," said Patricia Morrison, Mara's appeals attorney, "my client is willing to terminate all parental rights in exchange for your agreement not to pursue additional civil damages." I sat across from her, flanked by my own legal team, reviewing the documents that would legally erase Mara from Lexi's life forever. 3 years had passed since the sentencing. Mara was serving her time at FCI Danbury, a federal women's prison in Connecticut. She'd filed appeal after appeal, all of them unsuccessful. Her conviction stood, her sentence was firm, and her prospects for early release were non-existent. Now, facing the reality of missing Lexi's entire childhood, she was offering to surrender the last connection she had to the outside world. "What does she want in return?" I asked. "Just your agreement not to pursue the civil fraud case," Morrison replied. "She owes substantial restitution already. Additional civil damages would be meaningless. She'll never be able to pay what she already owes." I'd been considering a civil lawsuit for years, partly for financial recovery, and partly to ensure that Mara could never profit from her story through book deals or media appearances. But the truth was, I'd already recovered everything that mattered. My company had not only survived the data theft, but had thrived in its aftermath. The publicity surrounding the case had actually enhanced our reputation for security, leading to new contracts and expanded operations. Financially, I was better off than I'd been before the betrayal. Emotionally, Lexi and I had built a new life together. She was now 9 years old, bright and happy, with no memory of the trauma that had torn our family apart. She occasionally asked about her mother, but those questions had become less frequent over time. She'd started calling my girlfriend Sarah Mom 6 months ago, and Sarah had embraced the role with genuine love and devotion. "I'll agree to her terms," I said finally, "but I want a complete termination of parental rights, with no possibility of reversal, no contact, no visitation, no communication of any kind." "She understands," Morrison replied. "She also wanted me to give you this." She handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Mara's familiar handwriting. "I don't want it," I said. "She asked me to tell you that it's not an attempt to manipulate or contact you. She just wanted to say goodbye." I took the envelope but didn't open it. The legal proceedings took less than an hour. Documents were signed, notarized, and filed. With the stroke of a pen, Mara Hollister ceased to exist as far as the law was concerned when it came to our daughter. That evening, I sat in my study with the unopened letter. Sarah was upstairs helping Lexi with homework, their laughter drifting down the stairs like music. This was my family now. Not the broken remnants of betrayal, but something new and healthy and real. I almost threw the letter away without reading it. Instead, I opened it. "Sem, I know you hate me. I know you have every right to hate me. I know that saying I'm sorry is meaningless after everything I did to you and to Lexi, but I need you to know that I loved you both. I know that sounds impossible after what I did, but it's true. I loved you, and I destroyed that love through my own choices. I have to live with that knowledge for the rest of my life. I've had 3 years to think about what I did, and I finally understand something. You didn't destroy our family. I did. You didn't take Lexi away from me. I threw her away when I chose Reed over my own daughter's welfare. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that every day in this place, I think about the life I could have had if I'd been a better person. I think about the mother I could have been to Lexi if I'd chosen differently. Take care of our little girl. Tell her that her first mommy loved her very much, but that she had to go away because she made mistakes. Don't tell her the truth about what I did. Let her remember me as someone who loved her, not as the criminal I became. I hope you find happiness. I hope Sarah makes you both happy in ways I never could. You deserve that. Goodbye, Mara. I read the letter twice, then walked to the fireplace and fed it to the flames. Some chapters of your life deserve to end completely. Upstairs, I found Sarah reading to Lexi in her bedroom. Hootie sat on the nightstand, no longer a surveillance device, but simply a beloved toy again. I'd removed all the electronics years ago, returning him to innocent stuffing and fabric. Daddy. Lexi looked up from her book. Sarah's reading me the story about the princess who saves herself. That's a good story, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. The princess is really smart, just like you, Daddy. She figures out how to escape from the bad people all by herself. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is ask for help when you need it, I replied, looking at Sarah with gratitude. But sometimes you have to be brave and save yourself, Lexi insisted. You're absolutely right, sweetheart. After we tucked her in, Sarah and I walked downstairs together. Everything okay? She asked. You seem thoughtful. Mara signed away her parental rights today. Sarah stopped walking. How do you feel about that? Relieved, free, ready to move forward completely. What about Lexi? Will you tell her? Someday when she's old enough to understand. For now, she has everything she needs. A father who loves her and a woman who's chosen to be her mother. Sarah smiled. I love her like she's my own. I know. That's why this works. We stood in our living room, the same room where I'd confronted Mara 3 years ago, where FBI agents had arrested a federal criminal, where one life had ended and another had begun. But it felt different now. The poison was gone. The lies were buried, and the people who remained were bound together by choice rather than obligation. Sem, Sarah said quietly, do you ever regret how things ended with Mara? I thought about that question, the same one Agent Walsh had asked me 3 years ago. I regret that it was necessary, I said finally. I regret that the woman I married chose to become someone I couldn't recognize. But I don't regret protecting Lexi. I don't regret seeking justice. And I don't regret the life we've built from the ashes of what came before. Good, Sarah said. Because this is a pretty amazing life. She was right. Standing in that room with the woman I loved, knowing that upstairs slept a daughter who felt safe and cherished, I realized that sometimes destruction is just the first step toward building something better. Mara had tried to take everything from me, my marriage, my child, my career, my freedom. Instead, she'd given me the chance to become the man I was meant to be. The man who could recognize threats and eliminate them. The man who could choose justice over mercy when the stakes were high enough. The man who could build a family based on truth instead of lies. Outside, Minneapolis sparkled in the autumn night, full of life and possibility. Inside, my family slept peacefully, protected by systems I'd built and choices I'd made. I'd won the war, paid the price, and earned the peace. Some victories are worth any cost. This was one of them.